Welcome to the Seatrade Maritime podcast, and you're listening to Marcus Hand, editor of Seatrade Maritime News. Today we're going to be in conversation with Tuomas Riski, CEO of Norsepower, talking about alternative forms of propulsion and how all parts of the industry can work better to meet shipping's decarbonisation goals, both near and longer term. Tuomas, welcome to the podcast.
Many thanks.
Thank you for joining us today, Tuomas. So just to start out, could you briefly introduce the business of Norsepower to our listeners, some of whom may not be familiar with the company's technology?
Okay, thanks. My pleasure. Our slogan is that we are bringing sails back to shipping. As we all know, in the old times, it was only sails moving the ships across the seas. And what we have done now, we have made a modernized mechanical sail. We are fitting this modern mechanical sail on board large cargo and passenger ships, and what we reduce the fuel consumption and emissions. And in typical cases, we have proven verified installations, a lot of them already, we can reduce the fuel consumption and emissions of the target ship with between 5 and 25% with our Norsepower rotor sail technology.
So you've modernized the sail. That's a pretty interesting concept, and the rotor sail. What's the uptake been like of rotor sails, and how has the industry reacted to these?
So far, we have fitted 6 different ships with our rotor sails. The performance has been verified by external parties, including like Lloyd's Register, NAPA, Chalmers University, so on. The experiences have been very good, and we have a proven performance for the product. And now the market has started to accelerate fast. As per today, we are delivering our rotor sails for 10 more ships. So the amount of installations is increasing with a fast pace, and more orders are coming in all the time. So we really see that the industry is now seeing this as a major thing, how to get shipping fleets decarbonized by using modern mechanical sails, and we are leading the market today.
That's great to hear. Just in terms of cutting emissions and so forth, and fuel consumption, what gains can owners expect to see from fitting rotor sails like this?
In typical cases, fuel consumption savings and emissions reductions are between this 5 and 25%. That's the major gain. They reduce the fuel consumption, the fuel cost, and they get a payback for the technology. But there are also other drivers present on the market. CO2 pricing is hitting the shipping market. That will be started from the European Union, and the IMO has plans how to make a global carbon levy or emissions trading for shipping. So our bigger customers are already today also discounting this forthcoming CO2 pricing, and that has an influence on the paybacks of a mechanical sail installation project. Then we see a lot of regulations stepping in. IMO has new environmental indexes like EEDI, EEXI, and CII. And these are all forcing ship owners to be compliant with the regulation. We see also these compliance drivers present on the market. Ship owners can't continue using the ship if they don't reduce the emissions somehow. And fitting rotor sails on board is an excellent way how to make this happen. We also see strong ESG drivers on the market. Companies want to be sustainable. They want to make investments which show that they are acting in a sustainable way. Also, that's supporting the uptake of rotor sails. And we also see that the entire ship financing market is today supporting our case. Ship owners are granted financing more easily if they make sustainability investments and show that they are reducing their emissions. So all these things are enabling the uptake of rotor sails and supporting our case today.
Okay, there's quite a lot to unpack from that answer, actually. You've covered quite a lot of different areas there. I'm going to take the first part there that you mentioned about the regulation part. Now, we've got the targets the IMO has set, but there's a lot of uncertainty around fuels and so forth. So how important a role do things like rotor sails play in meeting those nearer term targets?
We also see the future there will be these carbon neutral fuels in long term, which enable decarbonizing the shipping industry. But when we look at those scenarios, today's best candidates to be kind of carbon neutral long term fuels, they are hydrogen, methanol, and ammonia. When we look at them, we see that energy prices will be extremely high. Energy based on these carbon neutral fuels is several times higher than the price of today's typical low carbon or like say low emissions bunker fuel. So energy prices will be increasing, and that will make a big motivation to actually minimize the need for any fuel. And rotor sails are a very good way how to minimize the need for any fuel, and this technology is available already today. So now we see that the market is starting to adapt these mechanical sails to minimize the fuel consumption already today and to be well prepared for those long-term scenarios of soaring energy prices and carbon neutral fuels entering the market.
So it's not just a sort of like interim solution. This is actually longer term because of the cost of those fuels.
That's correct.
Yeah, so you get that sort of cost saving. If you're enjoying the Seatrade Maritime podcast, make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing on the app of your choice. Now, you talked a little bit on the financing side and so forth. We were on a webinar a couple of years ago. Some listeners might have even been on that, heard that webinar. And at the time, I think people were really booking one or two sails. Are we now seeing sort of larger sort of orders where people are doing, say, for parts or whole fleets?
We see today a lot of owners who are fitting one or two ships with the rotor sails. We are confident that if and when these projects go as well as our previous deliveries, there will be fleet-wide installations in the next phase. There are already queries on the market for fleet-wide installations of mechanical sails. So that will be the next phase. Customers start with one or two ship installations. They gain some experience on mechanical sails, and when they are happy, then we see that they are getting fleet-wide with this kind of technology.
You mentioned they're getting happy with mechanical sails. Is there much additional training required for the crew for the operation of these?
Actually, all the products on the market have been made so that they are almost fully automatic. For example, our rotor sail technology, the ship owner or the captain just needs to enable the system. Then the rest is happening automatically. The automation system is monitoring the wind conditions, and when they are favorable, it's automatically starting to accelerate the rotor sails to create forward thrust and to optimize the energy consumption of the ship. So that's fully automatic. Of course, these sails can also be controlled manually, but it's quite the rare use case where that kind of manual control would be needed. We try to make this fully automatic and very easy to be implemented and very easy to be used. According to customer feedback, we have been successful in making this happen.
Okay, great. So it's sort of fully integrated into the other propulsion systems of the vessel.
Absolutely correct. You know, in a way, wind used to be enemy of ships. When there was a strong wind, the ships started to roll and the cargo could get some damage, and so on. Ships try to avoid those windy seas. But now with today's modern mechanical sails, wind is becoming friend of ships. So they should install rotor sails, look for some windy sea and windy routes to get optimized forward thrust from the wind to minimize the fuel consumption and to minimize the emissions.
That's an interesting change. I hadn't thought about that. You mentioned about financing. Are these more suitable for a retrofit, for new buildings, and how would it be financed within that?
We are actually doing both. There are about 30,000 ships in the world which could be fitted with rotor sails in long term. And as I mentioned already, we are today delivering this technology for 10 ships. And 7 out of these 10 are retrofit projects. So there's a lot of rather new fleet of ships in the world which need to reduce their fuel consumption and emissions. And that existing fleet is target for retrofit project of rotor sails. But on the other hand, new builds are coming in all the time. We are also delivering the technology for new build ships. So both scenarios are available, and both new build and existing ships are today fitted with mechanical sails.
Okay, great. Just in terms of operating these vessels, do they, fitted with rotor sails, do they work better in some parts of the world than others? Do you know, like, are there better wind conditions and so forth?
Yes, that's correct. So actually the trading area of the ship, it has a pretty big influence on the business case with rotor sails. We have proven that we can reduce the fuel consumption and emissions on all long-haul ocean routes. But the best routes in the world are, for example, Northern Pacific crossing and Northern Atlantic crossing. It's because of the property of this planet that the strongest winds are blowing far from the equator areas. So the further north or further south you go, the better wind you can catch for the rotor sails. But as said, on all long-haul ocean shipping areas, you can reduce the fuel consumption and emissions with mechanical sails.
But there is a better business case if you're on those particular trades where you get very strong winds.
That's correct.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. These rotor sails are pretty large. How does that impact ship design?
It's correct, our products are pretty large. The biggest rotor sail we are today delivering, it's 35 meters tall and 5 meters in diameter. On the other hand, our smallest model today, it's 18 meters tall and 4 meters in diameter. It influences the ship design, but on the other hand, we have different sizes of product available to serve different ships. There are always criteria to be taken into the account when fitting rotor sails on board a ship, but as we have proven through several deliveries already, we can fulfill these criteria by selecting appropriate size of rotor sails and a good number of them. And criteria which we use when fitting rotor sails on board are, for example, that we never want to occupy any cargo space because of mechanical sails, and we want to make sure that the ship is able to continue its ordinary loading and offloading operations, pass under any bridges, and so on. So we have made a product which can comply with this kind of customer criteria and be fitted on board any compatible ship.
You mentioned about passing under bridges and so forth. Does that mean they can be retracted?
That's correct. As an option to our rotor sail product, we have kind of hydraulic hinge, which is placed between the deck and the rotor sail. When the ship is passing under a bridge, and if this optional tilting foundation is included in the design, the rotor sails can be lowered down from vertical to horizontal position to enable passing under that bridge. And this same tilting functionality is, for example, used on board bulk carriers. When they need to load or offload the cargo, the rotor sails can be tilted down so that they don't obstruct any cargo handling cranes and other systems.
That makes a lot of sense. When it actually comes to the ship design, if you're putting these on a new building, are there any alterations to the designer required, or could the ship be better optimized if you know that rotor sails are going to be fitted?
If you design a new build ship so that the starting point is to have rotor sails on board, you can do some optimizations. You can choose a convenient propeller for this variable load. You can make deck structures so that any wind isn't obstructed. The rotor sails catch the best possible wind. So that's all doable in a new build case. But it's not a huge difference, as we have proven. Today, 70% of our deliveries are for retrofit cases. So also existing ships are fully compatible with the technology, and most of the benefits can be gained even on an existing ship.
If you're doing a retrofit, how long would the ship have to go into the yard for?
We typically always do these retrofit deliveries aside of ordinary docking period of the ship. A typical target ship, when it's docked, it's taking about 1 month. And that's easily enough for a rotor sail retrofit project so that they don't need to lengthen the docking period because of this installation.
So when they're going in for a special survey or something of that nature?
That's it.
Yeah, okay. Coming back to the design part of this, I mean, shipyards prefer standard designs. They have sort of particular models. Is there more flexibility required with these designs going forward? Because we've got this quite uncertain future that we were talking about before, fuel types and so forth.
We see it on the market that ship owners are starting to prepare to fit mechanical sails on board their ships. And if you make a new build ship, one way to prepare is that ready-made foundations for our rotor sails, for example, are manufactured for a ship, so that this can be fitted later on as easily as possible. So that's a good way to be prepared for future installations of mechanical sails. But as I have mentioned, also any existing ship which doesn't have foundations can be fitted with rotor sails during a typical docking period.
Yeah, I understand that. Just more in terms of, I guess, optimizing going forward with newer vessels. As Norsepower, do you have any agreements with shipyards in terms of fitting these, or do you just work with whoever, where the vessel is going to be in dock or built?
It's always the end customer who is choosing the shipyard where to, of course, build the ship or fit the rotor sails. But we have already experience with several shipyards, both in Europe and in Asia, of fitting our technology. As an example, DSIC's shipyard in China is today building 3 pieces of new build CO2 carriers to be fitted with rotor sails. There are also other major shipyards in Asia who have already experience of rotor sail fitting. So there's a variety of different actors on the market who are able to provide this kind of fitting work for the end customer.
So that experience is growing. Is there a sort of greater level that shipyards and equipment manufacturers like Norsepower can work together in future to optimize the ship designs?
Yes, we see that's the case. So entire market is looking for ways to decarbonize the shipping fleets. And I see that all major shipyards are interested in fitting mechanical sails on board. So we are looking for increased cooperation with global major shipyards and happy to enter into that kind of agreements to enable smooth implementation of rotor sails.
Are you actually currently working with any shipyards yourself, on a more like long-term basis?
As said, there are shipyards in Asia building fleets of new build ships nowadays, and they are prepared to fit rotor cells on board. So yes, we are working with different ones. The example is that DSIC shipyard in China, who is building those new build CO2 carriers with rotor cells.
Yeah, okay. Quite an interesting future coming up. It's in some ways, quite an exciting time for shipping. When you look at it from your perspective, what do you think the future of ship propulsion will look like?
There's a high need to decarbonize shipping in long term, and everybody sees that, especially long haul shipping, it's very hard to be decarbonized. For example, batteries, they don't have enough capacity compared with volume and weight to enable that kind of long haul shipping. So it's evident that ships will always need a fuel to enable long haul passages. And outlook of decarbonizing fuels, it shows clear that those fuels will be heavily expensive. So the starting point to decarbonize shipping is to minimize the need for any fuel. And we see that mechanical sails, like our rotor sails, are an elegant way how to make that happen, how to minimize the fuel consumption and reduce it from current levels between 5 and 25%. And that's something that can be done already today. So that's why rotor sail market is already now accelerating, and we see a bright future for this kind of technology.
Elegant solution. I like that description. Covered a lot of ground very quickly. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add, Thomas?
One more point I'd like to highlight. Today, when we look at the payback period of a rotor sail installation project, heavily depending on the route of the ship and parameters and service speed and all that, but I could say that typical payback period range for a rotor sail project is maybe between 3 and 10 years. But when ship owners is looking at their ship, when they are thinking the future scenarios, what happens after that payback? Let's say that they make a rotor sail installation project which is paying back within 5 years after the installation. Then it has paid itself entirely. But what kind of asset do they have in their hand? They have a ship which is extremely energy efficient. And when we look at the second-hand value of this kind of asset, it will be in long term highly defined by the amount of emissions and fuel consumption the ship is producing. So in addition to getting a nice payback and money back from this kind of installation project, fitting rotor sails on board is a very good way to maximize the asset value of ships. I think that also this is driving the market forward today.
Excellent. There you have it, listeners. That's how to maximize the value of your ship. Fit a rotor sail. It's been fantastic talking to you today, and thank you so much for taking the time to appear on the Seatrade Maritime podcast.
Likewise, many thanks. It was a pleasure to chat with you today.
Thank you for listening to the Seatrade Maritime podcast, and we look forward to joining you on our next episode.